The idea of awakening sounds beautiful. Serene mountaintops, quiet minds, and a feeling of deep inner peace. It's easy to imagine it as a moment of clarity or a sudden enlightenment, a clean break from confusion into purpose. But what if awakening doesn't feel like that at all? What if it begins with disorientation instead of direction? What if, rather than providing comfort, it first unravels everything we thought we knew about ourselves? We rarely talk about the other side of awakening, the chaos before the calm, the fear before the insight. When the ego begins to fracture, when familiar narratives collapse, it doesn't feel like bliss. It feels like falling, like grieving, like losing control. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who spent his life exploring the depths of the human soul, spoke not of sudden enlightenment, but of a painful, ongoing confrontation with the unconscious. He called it individuation, a process of becoming whole, which often starts with fragmentation. This is not the part of the journey that makes for easy headlines or viral quotes, but it's real, and it's essential. In this reflection, we'll explore what psychic awakening truly entails, not as a romantic ideal, but as a raw, transformative encounter with the unknown within us. We'll look at why the first steps toward awakening can feel more like breaking down than rising up, and why that discomfort might be the most honest sign that something deeper is finally beginning. The subtle beginning. A call from the unconscious. Awakening doesn't announce itself. It whispers. At first, it's barely noticeable, a vague sense of unease. Life looks fine, even good, from the outside. But inside, there's a quiet tug, a feeling that something isn't quite right. You can't explain it, but you also can't shake it. That soft restlessness, that subtle discontent, is the first message from the unconscious. This is the threshold of awakening, not marked by thunder or revelation, but by discomfort. A moment when the inner world begins to stir, quietly questioning the structures that once felt solid. There's no clear reason, just a sense that the life you've built no longer fits the person you're becoming. Carl Jung taught that the psyche doesn't speak in straightforward terms. Instead, it communicates through dreams, emotions, and symbolic experiences, messages wrapped in metaphor and mystery. At this stage, the unconscious isn't loud. It doesn't push or demand. It simply calls. The call may come as a feeling of being off, or a growing distance from what once brought joy. It may arise in a dream you can't forget, or a strange synchronicity that lingers in your thoughts. These are not accidents. They are signs, not of something wrong, but of something beginning. The ego, trained to keep us aligned with outer expectations, often resists. It wants answers, reasons, plans, but the unconscious doesn't speak in linear logic. Its language is soul language, intuitive, symbolic, and deeply personal. The first step in awakening is not action, but awareness, a quiet noticing. Something is stirring in me. I don't know what it is yet, but I can feel it, and I can't ignore it anymore. This is the beginning, not a grand epiphany, but the seed of inner transformation. A soft whisper from the depths of the self. Are you listening? The process of inner unfolding. Awakening is not an event. Many imagine awakening as a sudden breakthrough, a moment when everything becomes clear, like light flooding a darkened room. But in truth, awakening is more like a slow, sometimes painful unraveling. It's not a singular event, but a continuous process that unfolds over time, layer by layer. This process moves in waves. One moment may bring a surge of insight, followed by a period of disorientation or confusion. Then comes a temporary sense of clarity, until new, deeper questions arise. This cyclical rhythm is part of the inner work, teaching us that awakening is not about arriving somewhere final, but about learning how to stay present with each stage of the journey. In this unfolding, everything begins to carry meaning. A fleeting emotion, a dream, an image, or a gut feeling can feel charged with a quiet significance. These inner signals invite us to listen more deeply, not just to the world outside, but to the subtle intelligence within us. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." He also emphasized that true transformation doesn't come from piling on more knowledge, but from integrating the aspects of ourselves we have long ignored or rejected. Awakening asks us to face the shadows, the discomfort, and the contradictions within, not to fix them, but to welcome them home. Importantly, this path is not about seeking definitive answers. In fact, the more we grow, the less interested we become in fixed truths. Awakening shifts the focus from certainty to curiosity, from "what is the answer?" to "what am I not yet seeing?" In this way, we begin to ask better questions, ones that invite us into deeper self-inquiry and presence. Ultimately, awakening is not a destination, but a deepening, a softening, a willingness to be undone and remade again and again by the mystery of our own becoming. Dreams and symbols, the unconscious speaks in metaphor. One of the first and most accessible tools of psychic awakening is the dream. Far from being random mental noise, dreams are symbolic stories carefully woven by the unconscious mind. They carry meaning not through literal logic, but through metaphor and emotional resonance. Carl Jung believed that dreams are messages from the unconscious, aimed at restoring balance within the psyche. When we are out of alignment, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, our dreams often become more vivid, urgent, or strange, signaling that the unconscious is trying to communicate something we've been ignoring. Common dream motifs such as falling, being chased, or losing control are not to be taken at face value. Falling might reflect a loss of control or fear of failure. Being chased may point to unacknowledged anxiety or a part of ourselves we're trying to avoid. Losing one's voice, teeth, or way could suggest insecurity or fear of being powerless. These symbols vary depending on the individual, but their emotional weight is universal. To awaken psychically is to begin paying attention to these inner messages with curiosity rather than fear. Instead of dismissing dreams as nonsensical or confusing, we learn to approach them as sacred texts, written not in words, but in images and emotions. Keeping a dream journal, meditating on powerful symbols, or discussing dreams with a trusted guide can help open the door to deeper insight. As the unconscious speaks in symbols, developing a relationship with this symbolic language is a key part of awakening. The more we listen, the clearer the messages become, and the more connected we feel to the deeper, intuitive parts of ourselves. Dreams are not just reflections of our psyche. They are guides, pointing us toward greater wholeness. Meeting the shadow, what we don't want to see. The shadow is the part of ourselves we often wish didn't exist. The anger, envy, greed, shame, and fear we've disowned or buried deep. Carl Jung described the shadow as the unknown dark side of the personality, made up of everything we repress or reject in order to present a socially acceptable self. Yet, denying the shadow doesn't make it disappear. It simply drives it into the unconscious, where it operates unseen, shaping our behaviors, reactions, and relationships. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In other words, the less we acknowledge our shadow, the more control it has over us. We project it onto others, blaming them for traits we can't face in ourselves. The arrogance we condemn, the weakness we mock, the cruelty we fear, these may be reflections of our own denied traits. Shadow work is the courageous process of turning toward what we'd rather avoid. It doesn't mean indulging in harmful impulses or becoming consumed by darkness. It means acknowledging these parts with honesty and compassion. When we face our shadow, we no longer need to project it. We stop blaming the world for what we haven't resolved within. This shift opens the door to genuine self-awareness and emotional maturity. The journey isn't easy. It can be painful to recognize that what we criticize in others may live in us too. But in doing so, we reclaim energy previously spent in denial, guilt, or resistance. We begin to respond to life more consciously, rather than reacting out of hidden wounds. Ultimately, the goal isn't to purify ourselves or transcend the shadow. It's to integrate it. True awakening doesn't mean becoming perfect or untouched by darkness. It means becoming whole, with the strength to hold both our light and our dark. Paradoxically, the more we accept our shadow, the less it controls us, and the more compassion we can extend, both to ourselves and to others. Meeting the shadow is a turning point on the path of inner growth. It's where real transformation begins, not by becoming someone else, but by finally embracing all that we are. Synchronicity. When the inner and outer worlds align, synchronicity is one of the most mysterious and awe-inspiring aspects of spiritual awakening. It's the experience of meaningful coincidences, events that defy logic or probability, yet feel deeply significant, as if life itself is speaking directly to you. Carl Jung, who coined the term, described synchronicity as a meaningful coincidence that lacks a direct causal relationship, but still feels powerfully connected. Unlike random chance, these moments seem charged with purpose. They often arrive when you're on the cusp of change, growth, or inner clarity, as though the universe is mirroring your internal transformation through the outer world. You might hear a song that perfectly reflects your emotional state, receive an unexpected message just when you're thinking about someone, or repeatedly encounter a symbol, number, or phrase that stirs something within. These experiences can feel surreal, like waking dreams woven into the fabric of your everyday life. Synchronicities aren't necessarily signs pointing you toward specific decisions. Rather, they are invitations to pay attention. They nudge you to look inward and ask, "What's trying to emerge within me right now?" Or, "What truth am I being asked to notice?" The more tuned in you are to your inner life, your thoughts, emotions, and intuition, the more frequent and vivid these moments tend to become. It's not that the universe is suddenly sending more signals. It's that your awareness is expanding, allowing you to perceive the subtle patterns that were always there. Ultimately, synchronicity reminds us that the boundaries between the inner and outer worlds are more porous than they seem. In moments of synchronicity, life feels enchanted, not because magic is happening outside of you, but because something deeply aligned is happening within. The risk of escaping reality, spiritual burnout. One danger few talk about on the spiritual path is spiritual burnout. The exhaustion that sets in when inner work becomes an obsession rather than a journey of growth. In our eagerness to evolve, we can fall into the trap of constantly fixing ourselves, as though we're a never-ending project in need of repair. The quest for awakening becomes a relentless pursuit of healing, purging, and self-analysis, leaving little room for simply being. But true awakening is not about relentless introspection or achieving some perfect version of yourself. It's about balance. Just as the body needs rest, the soul does too. Deep spiritual work requires moments of stillness, but also moments of play, connection, and lightheartedness. Laughter, creativity, and even boredom have their place in a healthy, awakened life. When spirituality becomes a means of escaping the messiness of everyday reality, relationships, responsibilities, emotions, it turns into another form of avoidance. The goal isn't to transcend life, but to meet it fully, with greater awareness and compassion. Real growth means showing up to the mundane as well as the mystical. Learning to be present, not just on the meditation cushion, but in traffic, at work, during conflict, and in community. Spiritual burnout often stems from forgetting that we're already whole, even as we grow. The inner work is meant to deepen our humanity, not erase it. If your practices leave you feeling depleted, isolated, or overwhelmed, it might be time to pause, not to give up, but to integrate. The most profound shifts often come not in doing more, but in allowing ourselves to simply be. Remember, your spirit thrives not just in depth, but in balance. The spiritual ego, the illusion of superiority. One of the most subtle and deceptive traps on the path of personal or spiritual growth is the development of the spiritual ego, the belief that one is more evolved, awakened, or enlightened than others. It sneaks in quietly, often disguised as confidence or insight, but ultimately reinforces the very self-centeredness that genuine awakening seeks to dissolve. The spiritual ego forms when growth becomes an identity. We may begin to define ourselves by our practices, our insights, or our level of awareness, and start to unconsciously compare ourselves to others. We might look down on those who still don't get it, or speak of our breakthroughs with an air of superiority, as if we've crossed a threshold others have yet to reach. This mindset is seductive because it feels like progress, and in some ways, it is progress. But it also reanimates the same egoic structures we hope to transcend. Instead of being ruled by material success or status, we're now ruled by spiritual pride. The paradox is that true spiritual maturity is marked by humility. The more we awaken, the more we realize how vast the unknown is, and how little we can truly claim to grasp. Authentic depth carries a softness, a gentleness. It doesn't need to be declared or defended. Recognizing the spiritual ego is not a failure, it's a milestone. It means we're deepening our awareness. But it also calls us back to the heart of the journey. Presence, compassion, and the quiet courage to keep letting go. Even of the idea that we're awake. In the end, the spiritual path isn't about becoming someone special, it's about becoming no one. And in that, realizing we're all already whole. Embracing duality, light and shadow, strength and fragility. Carl Jung taught that the path to wholeness lies not in denying our inner contradictions, but in embracing them. Human beings are built on dualities, light and shadow, strength and fragility, joy and sorrow. To awaken is not to rid ourselves of the darker aspects, but to recognize that both polarities belong. We are not meant to be only light, just as we are not solely made of shadow. Light gives us direction, vision, and warmth. Shadow offers depth, mystery, and the raw material for growth. When we repress fear, grief, or insecurity, they do not disappear. They fester in the unconscious, quietly influencing our behavior. Only by facing these parts with compassion can we begin to understand them and ourselves. True strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the courage to stand in it. Fragility does not make us weak. It makes us human. Joy is more vibrant when we have tasted sorrow. Confidence becomes grounded when it has wrestled with doubt. These contrasts do not cancel each other out. They complete the picture. Integration is the heart of healing. It asks us to look inward, not with judgment, but with curiosity and acceptance. The goal is not perfection, but wholeness, a dynamic, living balance that honors all parts of who we are. When we hold both sides, the light and the dark, we begin to walk with authenticity. We stop performing who we think we should be and start becoming who we truly are. In this space, awakening is not a distant ideal, but a lived, everyday truth. The never-ending path, awakening as a way of being. There is no final stage, no badge to earn, no destination that signals you've arrived. Awakening is not a trophy to place on a shelf. It's a way of being that unfolds endlessly. True psychic or spiritual awakening is not about acquiring powers or answers that seal your understanding forever. It's about stepping into a living relationship with the mystery of existence, one that deepens with time, curiosity, and courage. To awaken is not to transcend life, but to be fully present in it. Moment by moment, we're invited to meet reality with openness rather than control, with listening rather than grasping. This path asks us to stay soft when we want to harden, to stay curious when we'd rather conclude. You don't become someone else. You become more you, stripped of pretense, alive with authenticity. Layers fall away. Stillness becomes more accessible. And paradoxically, so does chaos. The deeper the awakening, the more fully you feel life. Its grief and grace, its vastness and vulnerability. This is not a path with a clear ending. It's a rhythm, a returning, a remembering, again and again. You may forget, you may close, but awakening is always here, waiting to be noticed. In this way, the path is not linear, but circular. Not about arrival, but about presence. And in choosing presence, you are always home. Awakening is a universal gift, inherent to every human being, not reserved for the elite or specially chosen. It is our birthright to seek deeper understanding and connection with ourselves and the world around us. Yet, this journey demands courage, the bravery to question long-held beliefs, to feel deeply, and to face our own truths without denial or distraction. True awakening embraces both light and shadow. It calls us to explore the mystery within, to find meaning not only in joy, but also in struggle, and to cultivate love that transcends the surface. Carl Jung offered us a profound map of this inner landscape, but ultimately, the path must be walked individually, with honesty and openness. In the quiet spaces between our questions, we may begin to hear the subtle voice of the soul, inviting us to see beyond illusions and to embrace the whole of our being. As Jung reminds us, enlightenment is not about imagining radiant light alone, but about bringing the unconscious darkness into consciousness. This invitation to begin again is both a challenge and a promise, to live more fully, more authentically, and with greater compassion for ourselves and others.